He took everything from me, my dignity, my career, and our home. He left me with a $100,000 debt I didn't even know existed. He thought it would bury me. He never expected that the debt itself was the key to unearthing the grave he was digging for himself. My name is Alara Reed. I am 34 years old. I live by a simple code: what gets measured gets managed. My world is one of systems, of predictable inputs and logical outputs. As a senior data analyst at Innovate Solutions, I build frameworks that turn chaos into clarity. My life in Denver, Colorado, was a reflection of this belief. Our loft apartment was my sanctuary of order. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, the light hitting the polished concrete floors just right every morning at 7:05 a.m. Every throw pillow, every Scandinavian-designed chair was chosen for its precise place in the composition. It was perfect. And then there was Mark, my husband of 6 years. Mark, at 36, was the opposite of predictable. He was all charisma and velocity. He called himself a startup consultant, a title that seemed to cover a whirlwind of late-night calls, angel investor meetings, and sudden, flashing business trips. He lived in the abstract, in the next big thing, while I lived in the tangible, in the data that proved the present. I admired his ambition. I truly did. I loved the energy he brought into a room, the way he could spin a narrative of future success that made it feel inevitable. I told myself that his constant motion was the engine of our future. We were a team. I was the foundation. He was the skyline. If that meant our evenings together grew shorter, if his side of the bed was empty more often than not, it was a temporary sacrifice. We were building something. Our 6th anniversary dinner, just a few months ago, should have been a warning. He booked the trendiest spot in Lodo, the kind of place with mood lighting so dark you could barely read the menu. He presented me with a heavy, silver bracelet, intricately designed. It felt cold and substantial on my wrist. "It's beautiful, Mark," I said, and I meant it. "Only the best." He smiled, but his eyes were already flicking down. His phone was on the table, face up, vibrating silently every few minutes. He kept glancing at it, a tight little smile on his face. "Sorry, Ellie," he said, picking it up. "This is it, the big one." He typed rapidly, that smile turning into a grin. The bracelet suddenly felt heavier. The big deal seemed more present at our table than I was. Later that week, I saw his phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. He was usually so careful about that. A notification had lit up the screen, and I saw the icon before he quickly snatched it up. It was a banking app, but not the one our joint account was with. It was a sleek, black icon I didn't recognize. "What's that?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Oh, just some junk fintech app," he said, dismissing it with a wave of his hand as he shoved it into his pocket. "A client is making me test it. It's terrible." He kissed my forehead, a quick, distracting gesture. "Forget about it." So I did. Or I tried. I was the one who managed our domestic ledger. Every Friday night, I would sit at my home workstation, our shared accounts open on one screen, my meticulous budget spreadsheet on the other. I found comfort in the reconciliation, in the way every penny was accounted for. Lately, the accounting had become creative. Mark's contributions to the joint account, which were supposed to be regular, had become sporadic. A large deposit one month, followed by 6 weeks of nothing. When I brought it up, he laughed. "Ellie, that's just startup life," he explained, as if to a child. "It's all about cash flow. The money is there. It's just tied up in escrow, or waiting on wire transfers, or locked in convertible notes." They were terms I didn't fully understand, and he knew it. It was the one area where my data-driven mind felt muddy. He was the visionary. I was the analyst. I had to trust his data, but the numbers in my spreadsheet did not lie. They simply told an incomplete story. The gap between our expenses and his contributions was growing, and my salary was quietly stretching to fill it. There was a small, cold knot in my stomach, a data anomaly, a variable I couldn't identify. My intuition was sending up a flare, a quiet signal warning of a system failure. I ignored it. I was Alara Reed. I did not operate on intuition. I operated on evidence. And the evidence, the beautiful loft, the expensive bracelet on my wrist, the charismatic man who kissed me goodbye every morning told me everything was fine. I closed the spreadsheet. To face the anomaly, to pull at that single thread, would mean questioning the entire structure of the life I had so carefully built. And facing that truth felt far, far more terrifying than believing the beautiful, comfortable lie. The anxiety from the budget spreadsheet lingered. I couldn't focus on my work, the numbers on my screen blurring into meaningless shapes. I decided to clean, to restore order in the one way I still could. I started with my home office, a space that was usually immaculate, wiping down the minimalist oak desk. I opened the central drawer, a place for stray paperclips and business cards. My fingers brushed against something heavy and cold. I pulled it out. It was a fountain pen, a vintage model with a marbled green resin body and a gold nib. It was not Mark's. It was Mr. Harrison's. Arthur Harrison had been my first boss, my mentor at the staid, old-world accounting firm I'd joined right out of college. He was a man of ledgers, of double-entry bookkeeping, of rules that had not changed in a century. He believed in audits, in physical receipts, and in the inherent untrustworthiness of any business that grew too fast. He had passed away suddenly, 6 months ago. A massive heart attack, they said, gone before the paramedics arrived. Holding the pen, the weight of it in my palm, I was transported back, not to the funeral, but to our last real conversation. It was a lunch, 2 years ago, just after Mark and I had gotten engaged. I was showing off my new ring, my face aching from smiling. He had chosen the restaurant, a quiet, wood-paneled steakhouse that smelled of old leather and older money. He was a creature of habit, and this was his habit. He didn't congratulate me, not at first. He just sipped his water and looked at me over the top of his bifocals. "Ilara," he'd said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "This man, this Mark." "He's wonderful, Arthur," I gushed, already sensing his disapproval. "He's in disruptive tech. Is that it?" He used the term like he was handling a contaminated specimen. "He's a consultant for startups. He's helping build the new economy." I sounded, even to myself, like I was reciting a brochure. Mark's brochure. He set his glass down with a heavy, deliberate click. "I've been in finance for 45 years. I've seen new economies come and go. They're usually just new ways to commit the same old frauds. Crypto this, fintech that. It's vapor. It's noise. Arthur, it's not like that. Mark is brilliant," I insisted, the diamonds on my hand seeming to glitter in judgment. "He's too polished, Ilara," he said, leaning forward. The intensity in his eyes startled me. I ran his name. Just a casual inquiry. The companies he's consulted for half of them are shell corporations registered in Delaware. The other half fold within 6 months. He doesn't build things. He moves money around until it disappears. I felt a hot flush of anger. "You investigated him." "I ran a credit check, which is more than I can say for you." "Apparently," he retorted, his voice still quiet but sharp as a blade. "The man is a ghost. He has no real assets, just a mountain of leveraged debt. His numbers don't add up. He's like a house built on a hollow foundation." I put my hands flat on the table. "You're wrong. You're just old-fashioned. You don't understand this world. You're still using fountain pens in an age of data clouds. Mark is a visionary, and I'm insulted that you would dig into his private life." His face softened, but only slightly. The anger was replaced by a deep, profound sadness that, at the time, I mistook for pity. "Insulted? Yes, I suppose you are. Alara, your gift is not in vision. Your gift is in seeing the truth in the numbers. You are the most honest analyst I have ever trained. Do not let this man, this vapor, blind you to the math." The lunch ended quickly after that. Our relationship was never the same. It became strained, formal. When I left the firm a year later to join Innovate Solutions, a move Mark had heavily encouraged, Arthur simply shook my hand and wished me luck. He looked like a man attending a funeral. When he died, I told myself I was mourning the mentor I once had, not the man I had disappointed. And then I remembered the rest of the lunch. As we were waiting for the check, he had slipped something small and black across the table. It was a USB drive, tiny, encrypted, and utterly unremarkable. "I hope I am wrong. Alara," he'd said, his hand covering it. "I hope you are right and I am just an old dinosaur. If I am, throw this away. Forget you ever saw it. But if, one day, you feel like you're standing on thin ice, if the numbers finally stop making sense, use this. The password is our firm's first federal tax ID." He'd made me memorize the 9-digit number right there, testing me twice before letting me pay the bill. I had forgotten all about it. In my anger, in my certainty, I had tossed it into this very desk drawer, burying it under years of accumulated junk. Now, I pulled the drawer open further. There it was, tucked in the back corner. My heart was beating in a slow, heavy rhythm, a drumbeat of dread. I walked to my workstation and shut down the budget spreadsheet. The real world, the world of data, felt cold and unforgiving. I plugged the USB into the port. A drive labeled contingency appeared, a password prompt. My fingers were trembling, but they remembered the sequence. The 9 digits Arthur had drilled into me. I typed them in and hit enter. The drive opened. It was empty. Just a blank. White screen. No files, no folders, no secret ledgers, nothing. I clicked Properties. 0 bytes used. A wave of not relief, but a strange, hollow disappointment washed over me. He was wrong. He was just a paranoid old man, stuck in his analog world, threatened by a future he couldn't understand. Mark was right. The new economy was just complicated. I pulled the drive out and tossed it onto the desk next to the heavy green pen. Arthur Harrison was dead. His warnings were meaningless. I was alone with my spreadsheets, and I would have to make the numbers add up myself. The Chicago trip was a quarterly review, a marathon of spreadsheets and lukewarm coffee. My final presentation finished 3 hours early, and a weather front was moving in. The airline, miraculously, had an earlier flight. I took it. I texted Mark. "Got on an earlier flight. See you tonight." But I never checked if he read it. I just wanted to be home. I paid the cab and walked into the lobby of our building just before 11 p.m. The silence of the elevator was a comfort. I was exhausted. I was thinking of a hot shower and the cool side of my pillow. I expected the loft to be dark. Mark always worked late on his big deal nights. I slid my key into the lock. It was quiet. No, not quiet. I stopped, my hand still on the key. Music, very faint. A breathy electronic beat I didn't recognize. And then, a sound that made the blood freeze in my veins. A giggle, feminine, not mine. My first thought, logical and absurd, was burglar. A very relaxed, music-loving burglar. My heart didn't pound. It seized. I pushed the door open, inch by inch. The main room was dark, the city lights painting cold rectangles on the floor. The music was coming from the bedroom. Our bedroom. I took my shoes off, setting them down with surgical care. I padded across the polished concrete, my analyst's mind replaced by something primal. I wasn't scared for my life. I was just moving. Each step was silent. The hallway was a tunnel. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, a sliver of warm, dim light slicing into the hall. The music was louder now, and I heard another sound, murmuring. Mark's voice, low, and then the giggle again, sharp and clear. This was not a robbery. The realization hit me like a physical blow, sucking the air from my lungs. I was no longer an analyst. I was a spectator at my own execution. I pushed the door. It swung open silently. The scene was perfectly lit by the bedside lamps. A tableau. Mark was on the bed, propped up on one elbow, naked from the waist up. And with him, a woman I had never seen before. She was young, with a cascade of platinum blonde hair, her back to me. They weren't having sex. They were just talking, laughing. The intimacy of it was more violent than any act. Time stopped. The music, some banal pop song, became intensely clear, every synthetic drum beat. The woman turned her head slowly, her laughter catching in her throat. She didn't scream. She didn't gasp. She looked at me, this stranger in my bedroom, with an expression of pure, unadulterated boredom, as if I were a server who had brought the wrong drink. Mark's head snapped around. His eyes, when they found me in the doorway, were not guilty. They were not ashamed. They were furious. He scrambled off the bed, pulling the sheet with him, a reflex of modesty that was almost comical. "Ilara," he spat, his voice a harsh whisper. "What the hell are you doing home? You're supposed to be in Chicago." The question hung in the air. It was so illogical, so insane, that my brain simply refused to compute it. I could not form a word. I just stood there, my suitcase handle digging into my palm, my work blazer still buttoned. The woman, Chloe, sighed. It was a sound of profound inconvenience. She swung her legs over the side of the bed, completely naked, and began to gather her clothes, which were strewn across my armchair. She moved with a casual, unhurried grace. "Mark, really," she said, her voice a gravelly monotone. She pulled on a pair of black lace underwear, then a tight black dress. She did not look at me again. "Ilara, wait outside," Mark commanded, pointing to the hallway. He was trying to take control of the situation, to manage the narrative. But I couldn't move. My feet were welded to the floor. Chloe stood up, zipping her dress. She walked over to Mark, who was still fumbling with the sheet. She gave him a short, hard kiss. "Call me when you're done with this," she said, jerking her chin in my direction. And then she walked towards me. I was blocking the doorway, a frozen statue of a wife. She didn't stop. She just walked straight at me, forcing me to stumble back into the hallway. She slipped on her heels, straightened her dress, and walked out the front door of my apartment, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous silence she left behind. I was still standing in the exact same spot when Mark finally emerged from the bedroom, now wearing a pair of sweatpants. I had not moved. I had not breathed. I was processing the data. And then, one final, critical data point slotted into place. A detail I had registered without understanding. As Chloe had turned to leave the bedroom, the light from the lamp had caught something on her neck. It was silver. It was intricate. It was the expensive anniversary bracelet, my bracelet. It was hanging around her neck like a trophy. The numbers were finally adding up. The system had failed. The foundation was hollow. I was standing on thin ice, and it had just cracked. The silence in the loft was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the city, a distant, indifferent machine. Mark stood in the center of the living room, silhouetted against the wall of windows. He was waiting, not for forgiveness, but for the next scene to play out. My voice came out, but it wasn't mine. It was a dry, rasping sound. A machine someone had forgotten to oil. Why? It was a stupid question, a data analyst's question, a request for a variable that would make the equation make sense. I didn't ask, "Who is she?" or "How could you?" I asked why. Mark let out a long, theatrical sigh. He ran a hand through his perfect hair. He didn't look like a man caught in a lie. He looked like a man bored at a board meeting. "Ilara, I'm just so tired," he said. He walked over to the kitchen island and poured himself a glass of water, his hand perfectly steady. "I am so bored. Bored of this apartment. Bored of this predictable spreadsheet life. Bored of pretending that your pivot tables are interesting." Each word was a small, precise incision. He wasn't lashing out in anger. He was stating facts. The business trips. I managed, the bracelet on Chloe's neck flashing in my mind. They weren't business trips. He almost laughed. No, Ellie, they weren't business trips. They were vacations. That was Chloe. Sometimes it was others, but mostly, lately, it's been Chloe. She's fun. She doesn't care about reconciling accounts at the end of the month. The mention of Chloe, the ease with which he said her name, was what finally broke my paralysis. A cold, sharp anger, unlike anything I had ever felt, cut through the shock. This wasn't grief. This was analysis. A new problem had presented itself. "Get out," I said. My voice was clear now, low and steady. "Get out," I repeated, louder. "Get your things and get out of my home." Mark smiled. It was a thin, cruel smile that did not reach his eyes. "Oh, I'll go. I'm already packed. Have been for a week. I was just waiting for you to be in Chicago to make the move." He gestured to a sleek black suitcase I hadn't noticed, standing by the door, next to my own luggage. "But before I go," he said, walking to the minimalist desk in the corner, the one we had chosen together. He picked up a thick, creamy envelope and tossed it onto the concrete floor between us. It landed with a soft, sickening thud. "You should probably know about this. We are in debt. A lot of debt." I laughed. It was a single, harsh bark of a laugh. "Impossible. I manage the accounts. I balance the books every single Friday. We are fine. We have savings. We have equity." "You," he said, his voice turning sharp and precise. "Manage the joint account. The Ilara and Mark household budget." He used a mocking, sing-song tone. "I've been busy." He nudged the envelope with his foot. "I opened a line of credit, a business line of credit, for my next big thing." A hollow feeling was opening up in my chest, far colder and more terrifying than the infidelity. "You can't do that without me." "Oh, but I can," he said. And I did. And you know, the bank was very insistent. They said for a line of credit of this size, they needed a personal guarantor. So I gave them one. He crouched down, unzipped his suitcase, and pulled out a laptop. He flipped it open, tapped a few keys, and turned the screen to face me. It was a PDF document, a loan agreement. "You see, you co-signed. I did not." My voice was flat. "I have never seen that document in my life." "Haven't you?" he said. He zoomed in on the signature line, and there it was, Ilara K. Read, my signature, my precise, neat, analyst's signature. It was perfect, a perfect digital forgery. That's not real," I whispered. "It's real enough for the bank, Ilara. It's real enough for the law. An e-signature. So easy. You were in Chicago. Remember that trip 2 months ago? I told you I needed you to sign a simple incorporation document. You texted me, and I quote, 'Just handle it. I'm swamped.' So I handled it. My blood ran cold. I remembered the text. I remembered being annoyed at the interruption. I looked from the screen to his face. He was enjoying this. The power. The final brilliant move in his game. "The debt," I said, my voice barely audible. "How much?" He closed the laptop, a look of almost theatrical pity on his face. "The debt is for $100,000, he said. "From a private lending firm called Apex Capital. Very aggressive. Not the kind of people who like to be kept waiting." He stood up, zipping his bag. "And here's the kicker. Ellie, the real stroke of genius. It's a balloon payment. The whole thing is due in 30 days. 30 days. $100,000. He slung his suit bag over one shoulder and picked up his suitcase. He walked to the door, stepping over the envelope that contained my ruin. He paused at the door, his hand on the handle, and looked back at me, a final, appraising glance. Good luck with that. Ilara, he said. He closed the door. I heard the lock click, and then there was only silence. The envelope sat on the floor for a full day. I just stared at it. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I just sat on my Scandinavian sofa, watching the light change on the concrete floors, tracking the passage of time by the slow march of shadows across the hardwood. My perfect, orderly world had been reduced to a single cream-colored envelope. On the morning of the second day, I picked it up. The paper was thick, expensive. The letterhead was simple, embossed Apex capital. The language inside was not emotional. It was transactional. It referenced the loan agreement, the personal guarantee, and the default clause. The full principal and interest, a total of $106,212, was due immediately. Failure to pay within 30 days would result in the seizure of all pledged assets. My signature was on the guarantee. My assets were the loft. My first coherent thought was the savings. We had a joint savings account, a substantial one, meant for a down payment on a larger place. I hadn't checked it in a month. I had been busy in Chicago. I walked to the bank, my movements stiff and robotic. The teller, a young woman whose name I never bothered to learn, smiled at me. "How can I help you, Ms. Reed?" I explained I needed to transfer funds. I gave her my account numbers. Her smile faltered as she typed. She looked up, her expression now one of professional pity. "Ms. Reed, the joint savings account. It appears there's a balance of 0. "What? No, that's impossible. There was over $60,000. She typed again. Her lips pursed. "It looks like the full amount was withdrawn 3 days ago. By Mr. Mark Reed. And the joint checking," I whispered. "The same, ma'am. A balance of $12.48. He hadn't just left. He had scuttled the ship. He had taken the lifeboats and the rations, leaving me chained to the anchor. I found a lawyer that afternoon, a name scraped from a legal aid website, a woman who offered a 1-hour consultation for a flat fee I paid with my personal credit card. Her office was in a strip mall, smelled of stale coffee, and was painted a depressing shade of beige. I explained everything. The affair, the lies, the e-signature, the text message. I presented it like a data set, a logical progression of fraud. She steepled her fingers and listened, not unkindly. When I finished, she sighed. "Ms. Reed, I'm going to be very blunt," she said. "You're not going to win this. Proving e-signature forgery is difficult in the best of times. Proving it against a spouse, it's almost impossible. But I have the text he said to handle it. He will say, handle it meant sign it for me, that you gave him verbal authorization, which you've just admitted you've done in the past for other simple documents. The lender, Apex Capital, acted in good faith. They have a signed document. You will look like a spouse trying to get out of a debt after a marriage falls apart. The court will not see you as a victim. It will see you as liable." I left her office. The fee for a retainer to even try to fight it was $5,000. I had $12.48. The official lawsuit summons arrived a week later. A man handed it to me as I was checking my empty mailbox. "Ilara Reed," he'd asked, and I'd nodded dumbly. The paper was an accusation. Apex capital V. Ilara Reed. The walls were closing in. The loft, once my sanctuary, now felt like a pristine, glass-walled prison. I was trapped. And then, the world shrank further. The call came from my boss's assistant. "Mr. Davies needs to see you in his office. Now. Please." Mr. Davies was a senior partner, a man who believed in metrics and optics. I barely knew him. I walked to his office, my stomach a knot of cold dread. The lawsuit. He must have found out. He gestured for me to sit. His desk was immaculate. "Ilara," he began, his voice low and grave. "This is extremely difficult." He slid a printout across his desk. It was an article from a local legal blotter. Innovate Solutions analyst sued for $100,000 debt. This is not a good look. Ilara, he said, his voice flat. Mr. Davies, I can explain. I started. My husband. He forged my signature. He left me. He held up a hand, silencing me. He looked deeply uncomfortable. That's not all. I wish it were. He leaned forward, lowering his voice further. Innovate is currently, and this is highly confidential, undergoing a federal investigation. There's been a significant data breach. Client information. We are under a microscope. A data breach. I was lost. What does that have to do with me? He wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked at a point just over my left shoulder. Your personal life, Ilara. This lawsuit, this massive, suspicious debt. It makes you a security risk. A $100,000 debt. A person in that situation. They're vulnerable. They're a target for bribery. Bribery, I would never. It doesn't matter what you would do, he snapped, his corporate patience finally breaking. It matters what the federal investigators think you could do. We cannot have you, in your situation, with access to our most sensitive client data. It's an unacceptable liability. He took a breath and straightened his tie. The mask was back in place. Ilara Reed, you are terminated. Effective immediately. HR will escort you back to your desk to gather your personal effects. It happened that fast. In 1 week, I lost my husband, my home's security, and my career. My name, which I had built with pristine code and flawless analysis, was now toxic. I didn't have the money for the lawyer. I didn't show up for the court date. Apex Capital won by default. The judgment was immediate. They placed a lien on the loft. The for sale sign went up 2 days later. Strangers came in, walking on my floors, opening my cabinets, assessing the value of my life. I wasn't selling it. The creditors were. I was given a week to vacate. My perfect, orderly life, reduced to a single cardboard box. 3 months, 94 days. I tracked them like a prisoner. The seasons had changed. Autumn in Denver was a cruel beauty, all sharp gold and brilliant blue skies. But I saw none of it. My world was 4 walls of beige, textured drywall, and a carpet stained with the history of other people's desperation. I was living in a weekly rate motel off I-70. The Sunburst Inn. The sign was missing the S. I was in the Unburst Inn, a place where the sun never seemed to reach. The loft, my beautiful, light-filled, orderly world, had been sold. The proceeds were seized instantly by Apex Capital. I received a check for the balance, a pitiful sum of a few $1,000s, which was now almost gone. I had sold my jewelry, my mother's pearls, my college graduation watch. I had sold everything of value, piece by piece, for gas station cash. Everything except the silver bracelet Mark had given me. Chloe had that. I hoped it turned her skin green. My personal savings, the small account I had kept just in case, but had never been disciplined enough to grow, had evaporated. I had tried to find work. I am a highly skilled analyst. I am, or was, one of the best. But my name was now a red flag. The lawsuit was a public record. The termination from Innovate Solutions, while officially a layoff, was a black mark. In interviews, they would get to a certain point. Their eyes would flick to the screen, and the air in the room would chill. We have concerns about your recent legal entanglements. Your position requires a high level of security clearance and trust. We'll be in touch. They were never in touch. I had 1 cardboard box left from my old life. The movers had taken everything else to a storage unit, which the bank now also owned. This 1 box was personal. It held my college diploma, a few photos, and the small collection of items I had kept from Arthur Harrison's desk after his funeral. His green fountain pen, a worn copy of Security Analysis, and the black, empty USB drive. I sat on the edge of the squeaking motel bed. The air smelled of stale smoke and industrial cleaner. I looked at the box. I was at the bottom. This was the foundation Mr. Harrison had warned me about. the hollow place, a feeling that was not hope, but something closer to a final, desperate hypothesis, rose up in me. Arthur Harrison was the most meticulous man I had ever known. He was a man who believed in contingencies, in backups, in physical proof. He would not, could not, have left me a useless, empty piece of plastic as his final warning. It was a puzzle, and I was a data analyst. Empty is a state. It can be a lie. My laptop, a base model I'd bought with my last paycheck, was on the particle board desk. I plugged in the USB. Contingency. 0 bytes. I remembered a class in college, a specialized seminar on forensic data recovery. My professor had called it the art of finding ghosts in the machine. Steganography, hiding data in plain sight, making a file look like something else, or like nothing at all. I downloaded a simple open-source data recovery tool. I pointed it at the contingency drive. I ran a deep file structure analysis. The program whirred. A progress bar crawled. And then, it stopped. One file found. It was not a document. It was a JPEG file. A blank, white image. img001.jpg. Size 45.2 megabytes. I stared. A blank white image should be a few kilobytes, at most. 45 megabytes. That wasn't a file. That was a container. My fingers were trembling so hard I could barely type. I used the program to extract the raw data, bypassing the image layer. I exported the hidden data stream. The program asked what to call the new file. I named it Ledger XLSX. I clicked Enter. The file opened in my spreadsheet program. It was not a blank sheet. It was beautiful. It was a complete forensic accounting ledger. Tabs upon tabs. Dates, account numbers, wire transfers, incorporation documents. It was Arthur Harrison's final report. He hadn't been casually looking into Mark. He had been conducting a full, private investigation. My eyes scanned the columns. It was all there. Mark's shell companies. The investors who were just other shell companies. And then I saw the name. Apex Capital. I clicked on the tab. It was not a lending firm. It was a domestic LLC, registered in Delaware, date of incorporation 2 years ago. The sole signatory, the beneficial owner, the man who had founded it was Mark. My breath caught. I didn't understand. If he owned the company. Why I kept reading. I clicked on another tab, Client VT. It was a log of wire transfers, millions of dollars, moving from a developer named Vincent Thorne, the client Mark was always talking about. The money was being funneled from Thorne through a series of offshore accounts, and then, in smaller, specific increments, to Mark's various shells. Arthur had left notes in the margins, his voice cutting through the years with cold, precise anger. Classic money laundering. VT is the source. MR is the laundromat. But the numbers don't balance. MR is skimming. Mark wasn't just working for Thorne. He was stealing from him. And then I saw it. A single transaction, dated 7 months ago. A transfer from Vincent Thorne for exactly $100,000. But this one was different. It hadn't gone into the usual shell account. It had been flagged by Arthur with a red comment box. Where did this go? No corresponding deposit. A rogue element. Dangerous. I went back to the Apex Capital tab. I knew, before I even looked, what I would find. The loan. The $100,000 loan that Apex had given Mark, it was a phantom. It was an invention. It was the exact amount he had skimmed from Thorne. The pieces didn't just fall into place. They slammed into place, a sudden, brutal architecture of his entire plan. He had dirty money, $100,000, stolen from a very dangerous man. He couldn't spend it. He couldn't bank it. He had to wash it. So he created a debt. He borrowed his own stolen money from his own shell company. He forged my name as the guarantor. And then he detonated my life. The affair. The lawsuit. He knew I couldn't pay. He knew the court would force a sale. The loft. My clean, hard-earned, legitimate asset. When the loft was sold, the debt was paid. The court-ordered payment went straight from the bank to Apex Capital, to Mark. He had swapped his dirty, stolen, untraceable cash for my clean, legal, court-approved money. He didn't just leave me with his debt. He had forced me to launder his stolen money for him. The lawsuit, the public humiliation, my termination. It was all just collateral damage in his perfect, brilliant financial crime. I closed the laptop. The room was dark. The neon unburst sign outside my window cast a sickly red glow on the wall. I was not empty anymore. I was filled with a cold, pure, and very, very logical rage. I was a data analyst, and I had just found the data. I spent the next 48 hours in that motel room. I did not sleep. I did not eat the stale crackers I had left in a bag. I just drank lukewarm water from the tap and navigated the labyrinth that Arthur Harrison had built for me. The ledger was not a file. It was an indictment. Arthur's mind, so meticulous in life, was now immortalized in these cells. He hadn't just logged transactions, he had cross-referenced them, annotated them with his own dry, damning commentary, and built a narrative of a vast, interlocking criminal enterprise. He had followed Mark's digital and financial footprints from our loft in Denver to anonymous shells in Delaware, to the Cayman Islands, and finally to Liechtenstein. Mark was not a startup consultant. He was a sophisticated, high-level money launderer, and the $100,000 that had ruined my life. The debt that had cost me my home, my career, my identity. In Arthur's ledger, it was a rounding error. He had detailed, with agonizing precision, the real figures. Mark had been skimming from his primary client, Vincent Thorne, for years. He was supposed to be washing Thorne's money, but he was siphoning off a percentage. A little bit here, a little bit there. It added up. Arthur's final calculation, highlighted in a grim, bolded red, estimated Mark's personal stolen nest egg at just over $4.5 million. The $100,000 was just the last desperate grab he needed to clean his way. He had used me to launder the fraction he had stolen. But the real treasure, the millions, was sitting in accounts that Thorne didn't know about. My mind was sharp, moving faster than it had in months. The fog of depression and fear was gone, burned away by the cold light of the data. I followed the connections Arthur had laid out. I traced the flow of money from Thorne's development company, and then I saw a transaction that made my blood freeze. It was a recurring payment, not a large one, by these standards. $10,000 every single month, like clockwork. It wasn't going to one of Mark's shells. It was going to a domestic account. The recipient name was R. Davies. I stopped breathing. Mr. Davies, my boss at Innovate Solutions, the man who had fired me, his face a mask of corporate regret. I kept digging. I found another tab in the ledger, labeled Innovate Breach. Arthur had been looking into this too. He had found a digital marker, a trace. The data breach, it wasn't a random hack. It was an internal transfer. Someone on the inside had packaged and sold the client data, and Arthur had found the payment. A single wire transfer from one of Vincent Thorne's shell companies to Mr. Davies, a payment of $250,000. The data breach at Innovate Solutions was a setup, a fabrication. Thorne and Mark needed that breach to happen, perhaps to cover their own digital tracks, or to steal a competitor's data. Mr. Davies was their man on the inside. And I was the sacrifice. My termination, which had seemed so cruel and sudden, was now horrifyingly logical. It wasn't just about optics. It wasn't just that I was a security risk. It was a preemptive strike. My lawsuit hit the public docket. Apex Capital v. Alara Reed. It made me the perfect scapegoat. I was the senior analyst. I had the high-level access, and I suddenly had a massive, suspicious debt. I looked exactly like the kind of person who would sell company data for a quick payday. They hadn't fired me because they thought I might be a risk. They fired me to frame me. They fired me so that if any federal investigator started digging into the breach, all digital roads would lead back to the disgruntled, debt-ridden analyst who was conveniently no longer there to defend herself. They fired me to stop me from ever discovering the digital trail they had left, the trail that led from Thorne to Davies, and back to Mark. Mark hadn't just left me. He had placed me on the altar. He had painted a target on my back, leaving me to face the legal fallout of the breach, and worse, the potential wrath of a man like Vincent Thorne. I finally clicked on the last tab in the ledger. It was a simple text file, a note left by Arthur. It was addressed to no one, but I knew it was for me. Elara, it began, and the sight of my name in his familiar formal syntax made my throat tighten. If you are reading this, I am likely gone, and you are in trouble. I am sorry. I should have been more forceful at our lunch. The man you married is a hollow shell, but the men he works for are not. Vincent Thorne is not a real estate developer. He is the head of a significant criminal organization. He deals in extortion and fraud. Mark is his primary launderer. These are not people who forgive mistakes or theft. Mark is flying too close to the sun. They will not hesitate to eliminate loose ends. Be careful. They will see you as a loose end. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Mark hadn't just abandoned me to poverty. He had abandoned me to a death sentence. If Thorne ever found out about the real theft, the $4.5 million, and discovered that I was the wife who knew, or if he simply believed I was the one who bungled the data breach Mark had thrown me to the wolves to cover his retreat, I had to find him. But the ledger wasn't just a history. It was a calendar. Arthur, in his meticulousness, had been monitoring Mark's digital correspondence. He'd captured metadata for an upcoming event, the Rocky Mountain Tech Investment Summit. It was in 2 weeks, at a luxury hotel downtown, and listed as a keynote speaker Mark Reed. His presentation was titled The New Frontier Diversified Angel Funds. It was not a presentation. It was a sales pitch. It was his final move. He was going to take the $4.5 million he'd stolen, package it as a new investment fund, and pitch it to legitimate international investors. He was going to wash his entire stolen fortune in one afternoon, dilute Thorne's dirty money with clean money, and walk away as a celebrated venture capitalist. He would be untouchable. I looked at the date on my laptop. The summit was not in 2 weeks. Arthur had been dead for 6 months. The summit was in 3 days. I closed the laptop. The red glow of the unburst sign filled the room. The intellectual exercise was over. The planning stage had begun. My first impulse was to run to the Denver police, to hand them Arthur's USB drive, a pristine, undeniable case. But I stopped. I remembered the ledger. I scrolled to the tab Arthur had labeled Contingent Liabilities Local. It wasn't a list of debts. It was a list of names. 2 high-ranking detectives, a city council member, all receiving regular consulting fees from one of Vincent Thorne's construction shells. Going to the police wasn't just a risk. It was a death sentence. Arthur's ledger wasn't just an indictment of Mark. It was a map of a minefield. I was completely, utterly on my own. No, not completely. There was one person, Sarah, at Innovate Solutions. Sarah had been the shadow, our company's lead cybersecurity engineer. She was a true white hat hacker who operated on a diet of pure caffeine and systemic paranoia. While I analyzed data, she protected it. We were office friends, united by a shared cynical humor about the corporate nonsense that surrounded us. If Mr. Davies was the public-facing, political side of our department, Sarah was its unseen, brilliant, and deeply distrustful core. I couldn't use my phone. I couldn't use my email. I went to a 7-Eleven and bought a burner phone with cash. I called her. "Who is this?" she answered, her voice already suspicious. "It's Elara Reed. I need your help. I'm in trouble. I was framed." Silence. Then, "Where?" "Denver Public Library, main branch, 1 hour. Come alone." She was there in 45 minutes. She found me in the main reading room. I had secured a public computer in a remote carrel. She recoiled when she saw me. I had seen my reflection in the motel mirror. I was gaunt, my eyes two dark holes in a pale face. "Ilara, my God," she whispered, sliding into the seat opposite me. They said you were a risk." "I was," I said, "just not the way they meant." I plugged in the USB. I entered Arthur's 9-digit password, and I opened the ledger. I didn't show her the money laundering first. I didn't show her Mark. I clicked on the tab labeled Innovate Breach. Sarah leaned in. Her eyes, trained to find patterns in code, scanned the lines, the IP addresses, the transaction logs, the hidden payment. She saw the $250,000 wire transfer from Thorne's shell company to R. Davies. She didn't gasp. She just became very, very still. "I knew it," she finally hissed, her voice vibrating with a cold, professional fury. "I knew that breach was internal. The signature was sloppy. It was too perfect. It was designed to be found. When I tried to run a deep analysis on the server logs, Davies locked me out. He told me the feds were handling it personally. He was covering his tracks," I said, "and framing me." "That bastard," she breathed. She looked at me, her old cynicism gone, replaced by something hard. "He ruined you." "He was just a piece of it," I said. I clicked back to the main ledger. "This is the real story." For 20 minutes, she read. She saw the network. Thorne, Mark, Apex Capital, the $4.5 million, the $100,000 wash using my loft. When she finally pushed back from the computer, she looked pale. "Ilara, these aren't just fraudsters. This is organized crime." "I know," I said. "And Mark is the keynote speaker at the tech summit in 3 days. He's going to launder that $4.5 million into a legitimate fund and disappear." "So, what are you doing?" she asked. "I'm going to stop him. I'm going to show them. All of them. In that ballroom. I need you to help me get this." I tapped the USB onto that big screen. Sarah stared at me as if I were insane. "Ilara, they will kill you. In the middle of the ballroom." "They will kill me anyway," I said, my voice flat and certain. Arthur's note was clear. "I'm a loose end. Mark's wife. The analyst he framed, I know too much. My only chance is to make this so public that killing me becomes more trouble than it's worth." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Sarah's face. "The AV for that conference is a joke. It's run by a third-party vendor, but the hotel's network security is a sieve. I can get into their system from anywhere, but to switch the presentation feed at the right second, I need to be in their system. From the inside, you'd have to get me a hardline connection from the AV room." "I'll get it," I said. We had a plan. I had my last $200. I went online. A full pass for the summit was $2,000, but a ticket for just the final day keynote luncheon was $150. I bought it. The remaining $50, I took to a consignment shop on South Broadway. I was not going to this summit as a ghost. I was going as a peer. I found a charcoal gray suit, a size too big but with sharp tailoring. It was armor. I spent the next 2 days in the motel room, memorizing the summit schedule. Mark's speech was at 12:30 p.m. The final day. He was the main event. He would pitch, he would close, and he would be gone. The night before the summit, I was checking my burner email, a new account I'd set up at the library. There was one message, from an address that was just a random string of letters. The subject read. I opened it. "I know what you're planning. The summit. You need to meet me. Now." It gave an address. A dive bar 3 blocks from my motel. It was signed. Chloe. My blood turned to ice. She had found me. The bar was dark. She was in a back booth, nursing a club soda. She looked different. The platinum hair was pulled back into a severe ponytail. The bored expression was gone. She was alert, sharp, and did not look happy to see me. "You came," she said. "Who are you?" I asked, sliding into the booth. "I'm a private investigator," she said, her voice flat. "And you, Elara, are an amateur who is about to get us both killed. You, a PI. That night in your loft, that was a job. I needed to get close to Mark, confirm his assets, see what he was really made of. You walking in was an inconvenience." "A job for who?" I whispered. "Vincent Thorne." My breath hitched. "Thorne hired you to sleep with Mark." A look of disgust crossed her face. "Thorne hired me to find his money. He's a criminal, but he's a smart one. He suspected Mark was skimming, not just taking his laundering fee. He wanted me to find out how much and where it was." "4.5 million, I said, my voice quiet. Chloe's eyes widened, just for a second. Damn, I knew it was big. I didn't have a number. Where? "I have his entire ledger. My former mentor built it." She stared at me, a new, frank assessment in her gaze. "Okay, that changes the mission. My job was to locate the funds and report back to Thorne. Thorne's plan was to let Mark pitch his little summit, get all the new investors' money into one pot, and then Thorne would collect the whole thing, and Mark would have an accident." She leaned forward. "Mark thinks he's getting away with it. He's planning to take Thorne's money and his new investors' money and be on a plane to a non-extradition country by 5 p.m. tomorrow. My job was to get Thorne his money. But I have my own agenda. I'd rather see them both in prison." "So what now?" I asked. "Now, you stop playing like a victim," she said. "You bought a ticket to the lunch. That's adorable. You'll be in the audience. Mark will be backstage." She slid a plastic card across the table. It was a summit badge. It said, "Staff, all access." "I've been on site for 2 days, mapping his security," she said. "I can get you backstage. I can get you into the AV room. You and your hacker friend can do your data dump, but you get one shot. While you do that, I'll be handling Thorne, who's also attending, and I'll be handling Mark's exit." "What are you going to do?" Chloe smiled. It was the first time I'd seen it. It was terrifying. "I'm a PI, Elara, but I used to be something else. You get the evidence on that screen. I'll make sure the right people are there to see it, and I'll make damn sure no one walks out of that ballroom." The lobby of the hotel was a cathedral of glass and brushed steel. It hummed with the quiet, confident sound of money. My charcoal gray suit, my $50 armor, felt like sandpaper against my skin. My hands were slick with sweat. I walked past a 3-story water feature and toward the convention wing. The security was visible but relaxed. A man with a bored expression glanced at the luncheon ticket I had printed at the library, then at my face. He saw no one. He waved me through. I was inside, in a wide atrium filled with networking tables and banners displaying meaningless tech logos. "By the escalator." "Good." Chloe's voice was in my ear. She had given me a tiny, flesh-colored earpiece. "I'm coming down now." She appeared, descending the glass escalator, looking exactly like the event coordinator she was pretending to be. Black pantsuit, sharp, authoritative. The staff badge was prominent. She didn't look at me as she passed, but pressed the all-access card into my hand. "Put it on," she murmured. "Service hallway, behind the main ballroom, 2 minutes." I did as I was told. The hallway behind the main event space was a different world. The thick carpet was gone, replaced by concrete. The air smelled of disinfectant and warm hotel laundry. Chloe was waiting by a gray metal door. "He's schmoozing," she said, her voice a low, tight clip. "We're seating for lunch. He'll be backstage in 10 minutes to get wired for his mic. That's our window. The AV room is at the back. It's manned, but the main tech is on break until 12:15. She swiped a card and the door opened. We slipped inside. The ballroom was vast, dark, and filled with the roar of 1,000 conversations. Hundreds of tables, draped in white linen, were already filling up. 2 massive screens, each the size of a small building, flanked the main stage. And then I saw him. He was across the room, standing near the stage, shaking hands. He was laughing, that bright, effortless laugh that had once convinced me he was a good man. He was wearing a dark blue suit that probably cost more than my entire severance. He looked powerful. He looked rested. He looked like the future. He did not see me. I was just another shadow in the dark. The sight of him, so successful, so untouched, burned away the last of my fear. All that was left was the cold, clean logic of the ledger. "Don't stare," Chloe hissed. "Look, front row." I followed her gaze. There, at table 1, sitting directly in front of the stage, was Vincent Thorne. He was older, with silver hair and an impeccable suit, but his eyes were flat and watchful. He was a shark in a tailored suit, and beside him, laughing at something Thorne had said, was Mr. Davies, my old boss. They were sitting together, the architect of my ruin and the man who had finalized it, waiting for their star performer. They looked like proud fathers. "They're moving backstage," Chloe said. "Mark just went through. Let's go." We moved along the back wall of the ballroom. The AV room was a small, black-painted booth built into the wall, with dark-tinted windows looking out over the crowd. The door was propped open by a small rubber wedge. Chloe walked up to it. All confidence. A young volunteer in a bright green Summit polo shirt was standing guard. "AV team," Chloe said, flashing her badge. "Checking the keynote feed for Mr. Reed." The volunteer nodded, stepping aside. "Go ahead. Ryan's on break, but he should be back in a few." We stepped inside. The room was no bigger than a closet, lit by the glow of a dozen monitors and a complex switching board. It was empty. There, Chloe pointed, a network hub, an open Ethernet port. I pulled out my burner phone and Arthur's USB drive. I plugged the drive into the main console. My fingers were stiff. I texted Sarah, who was waiting, miles away, burrowed deep in the library's free Wi-Fi. "In. Drive is in. Port is open. I have a hard line. Can you see it?" My phone buzzed almost instantly. "I see it. I've been sitting in their network for an hour. Weakest firewall I've ever seen. The drive is now mapped. I'm telling their system it's the keynote backup file. When I give the signal, I'll intercept the call from his laptop and switch the feed." He clicks on his projection slide, and they see Arthur's ledger instead. "I'm ready. Just give the word. You have one shot." We stood in the darkness, watching through the glass. The lights dimmed, the room quieted. A spotlight hit the stage. A booming voice filled the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, the founder and chief visionary of Apex Capital, Mr. Mark Reed." The applause was thunderous. Mark walked onto the stage, soaking it in. His face, projected onto the giant screens, was a mask of confident, humble charisma. Thank you," he began. His voice, my husband's voice, filled the air. "The future. It's a word that implies risk, doesn't it? It implies the unknown. But I'm here today to talk about something different. I'm here to talk about trust." I felt the bile rise in my throat. "Trust," he continued, pacing the stage, "is the new currency. It is the bedrock of every successful investment. At Apex Capital, we don't just build funds, we build trust." He smiled, and in the front row, I saw Davies and Thorne smile with him. He was about to click to his first slide. My hand was on the burner phone, my thumb hovering over the text to Sarah. The doorknob turned. I froze. Chloe spun around. The door to the AV room pushed open. It wasn't the volunteer. It was a large man in a hotel security uniform, his gaze sharp and suspicious. "This room is restricted," he said, his voice a low growl. His eyes took in the scene. 2 women who were clearly not AV techs. Me, holding a burner phone, standing over his console. His hand went to the radio on his shoulder. "Who the hell are you?" "We're checking the feed," Chloe said, her voice calm. "I don't have you on my list," the guard said. He saw the USB drive. He saw the panic in my eyes. "Dispatch, I have a code 4 in the main ballroom AV." Chloe moved. She was not a PI. She was something else. She stepped forward, inside his guard, not to fight him, but to intercept the radio. Her left hand clamped down on his wrist, twisting it violently, snapping the radio's antenna. Her right hand, the fingers held rigid, drove straight into his throat. He made a horrible, gagging sound. As his hands flew to his neck in reflex, Chloe pivoted, bringing her elbow around in a brutal, compact arc that connected with his solar plexus. The air left his body in a single, explosive whoosh. He didn't yell. He just folded, collapsing onto the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. He was unconscious before he hit the carpet. It was silent. It was brutal. It took 4 seconds. But in those 4 seconds, the timing was gone. From the stage, Mark's voice boomed. "And as you can see from our projections for quarter 4, I looked at the giant screen. A graph. His graph. Fake projections. He had already clicked. Sarah was waiting for my signal. The moment had passed. "He's moving to the next one," I whispered, my voice shaking. "He's going to click again." Chloe was breathing hard, staring at the body. "We're out of time." "No," I said. I raised the burner phone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. I hit the send button on the draft to Sarah. "It just said now!" I put the phone to my mouth. "Do it!" I screamed, my voice raw. "Sarah, do it now!" On stage, Mark clicked the remote. He was moving to his profit forecasts slide, the triumphant finale of his presentation. "As you can see," he said, turning to the massive screen behind him. The screen flickered. It was not a graph. It was a spreadsheet. It was Arthur Harrison's ledger, magnified 1,000 times, glowing with a terrible, damning clarity. The crowd murmured, confused. Mark stopped. He stared at the screen. He clicked again, frantically. The slide did not change. Instead, Sarah's code began its work. The cursor, moving on its own, highlighted a tab. Apex Capital Ownership. Mark's name. His social security number. It clicked to another tab. Client VT. Vincent Thorne's name. Next to wire transfer amounts in the millions. It clicked again. Offshore shells. A spiderweb of accounts in the Caymans. The room, which had been buzzing, went absolutely, terrifyingly silent. Then the slide changed again, this time to a custom graphic Sarah and I had prepared. On one side, a screenshot of the lawsuit, the words $100,000 debt circled in red. On the other side, my bank statement, showing the proceeds from the loft sale. And in the center, a series of thick red arrows, showing the debt payment moving from my account directly into the account of Apex Capital. The final arrow pointed back to Mark's name, with the caption, "The Launder." Mark was white. He was tapping the clicker, but it was dead. He looked to the AV booth, his eyes wide with panic and rage, but the glass was too dark, too far. He couldn't see me, and then the sound system came alive. The speakers did not carry Mark's voice. They carried a recording. It was Mark's voice, but it was different. It was the voice I knew from our home. It was Chloe's recording. "Absolutely brilliant," his recorded voice boasted, echoing through the vast, silent ballroom. The data breach at Innovate Davies handled it like a moron, but it worked. We pinned it all on the analyst. The feds are chasing their tails, looking for some hacker. A pause, and then a laugh. Chloe's voice murmured something, and then Mark spoke again. "My wife. Oh, my naive little analyst wife. That was the masterpiece. I let her find out about me, about Chloe. She thinks I just left her. She has no idea she's the one who just washed my stolen $100,000. She's broke, she's unemployed, and she's legally liable for the whole thing. She's buried so deep, she'll never crawl out." The sound of a single silver fork clattering onto a porcelain plate was the only sound in the room. in the front row. Vincent Thorne stood up. His face was not panicked. It was a mask of cold, reptilian fury. He had not known. He had known Mark was skimming, but he had not known about the Innovate frame-up. He had not known Mark was this reckless. He had not known Mark was recording his confessions. He was exposed. Mr. Davies, beside him, looked like he was going to be sick. He was ashen, staring at his name, which Sarah had thoughtfully highlighted on the screen under Innovate Breach Payment. Thorne gave a short, sharp signal to a massive man standing by the wall, his bodyguard. The man began to move, not toward the stage, but toward the exit. He was going to cut off Mark's escape. "He's running," I whispered to Chloe, who was standing by the door of the AV booth. "He's not going anywhere," Chloe said. She stepped out of the booth, into the main ballroom. She was holding the radio she had taken from the guard. "This is Special Agent Chloe Jensen." She spoke, her voice calm and clear, but not amplified. She was speaking to someone else. "The targets are confirmed: Thorne, Davies, and Reed. All three are in the ballroom. We are a go. Execute." "Special Agent," I breathed. Chloe looked back at me, the first real, human expression on her face, a grim smile. "I'm not a PI. I'm FBI. White collar. We've been building a case on Thorne for 18 months. We knew he had an inside launderer. We just didn't know who. Your mentor's data." It was the final piece of the puzzle. As she spoke, the main doors of the ballroom burst open. Not one, but all of them. They didn't come in with sirens. They came in with silence. Men and women in dark blue windbreakers. FBI in stark yellow letters. They moved with a terrifying, practiced precision. They did not rush the stage. They fanned out, sealing the exits, moving between the tables. The investors sat frozen, their filet mignons forgotten. Thorne's bodyguard stopped. He saw the agents and put his hands up. Thorne himself sat back down, very slowly. He looked at the agent who approached his table and simply nodded, as if he had been expecting him. Mr. Davies just slumped in his chair, a broken man. But Mark was still on stage. He was trapped. He was cornered, illuminated by the twin spotlights, his crimes projected in 20-foot-high detail behind him. He looked from the agents to Thorne and back to the screen. His entire reality, the brilliant future he had built, had evaporated in less than 3 minutes. His eyes, wild and desperate, scanned the dark crowd. He was looking for an exit. He was looking for an answer. And then, his eyes found me. I had stepped out of the AV booth. I was standing in the shadows by the back wall in my $50 suit. He saw me. His face, for a single devastating moment, registered the truth. It was not the feds. It was not Thorne. It was me. I was the analyst. I was the one who had checked the math. 2 agents were walking up the steps to the stage. They didn't draw their weapons. They just walked. Mark didn't run. There was nowhere to run. I did not smile. I did not cry. I just watched. I watched as they took the clicker from his hand. I watched as they turned him around and placed his hands behind his back. I watched them cuff the visionary, the man who had built a house on a hollow foundation. The $100,000 debt he had used to bury me had just become the receipt for his life's destruction, and I was the one who had collected it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Please, drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories. Like this video and give it an extra boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.